After my divorce, I sought refuge in a quiet cabin far from the city's noise, desperate for peace, for solitude. But when I arrived, I wasn't alone. He was there, a quiet stranger with a familiarity that unsettled me. He was the caretaker of the cabin, a man with a rough exterior and eyes that seemed to see too much, as if he understood my pain without me saying a word. At first, I tried to keep my distance, but the pull between us was undeniable. Every time our paths crossed, the tension between us grew thicker. It was more than just the physical attraction. I could feel the emotional depth in his touch, the way he listened without speaking, the way he understood my silence. I knew I was treading dangerous waters, but the more I resisted, the more I craved him. And one night everything changed. The cabin was nothing like the busy, chaotic life I had left behind. I came here to escape, to find some sense of peace in the stillness of nature. The air was crisp, the trees whispering secrets in the wind, and the cabin itself was a cozy refuge from the storm I had been living in. The divorce had torn me apart, leaving scars that no one could see but me. I thought being alone would help, that solitude would be my salvation. But the moment I arrived, I realized I wasn't as alone as I had expected. He was there standing at the edge of the porch, watching me as I unloaded my bags from the car. The man who would be my caretaker for the duration of my stay, I was told. But there was something about him, something unspoken that made me feel both uneasy and strangely drawn to him at the same time. He was tall with broad shoulders and rough, calloused hands that spoke of a life lived outside of the city's comforts. His eyes were dark, almost too intense, and when he looked at me, I felt as if he could see right through me, peeling back the layers I had so carefully built over the years. I offered a small smile, but he didn't return it. Instead, his gaze lingered, measuring me in a way that made my heart race. There was a quiet strength about him, a kind of confidence that made me feel like I had to prove myself. I was used to being in control, but in his presence I suddenly felt like I had lost that control. "You're the caretaker?" I asked, trying to sound casual, though my voice betrayed a slight tremor. He nodded, his deep voice surprisingly soft. "Yeah, I'll be around if you need anything." I nodded and tried to walk past him, but his presence was like a weight I couldn't escape. I felt his eyes follow me as I moved toward the cabin, my every step becoming heavier, like I was being pulled by some invisible force. The first few days passed in a blur of isolation. I spent my time reading, walking through the woods, and staring out at the vast expanse of nature around me. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't ignore him. He was always there, just out of reach, but never far enough to make me feel comfortable. It was the way he moved, silent, deliberate, as if everything he did was intentional, and the way his eyes would catch mine whenever I wasn't looking. I couldn't help but feel like he was watching me, studying me, understanding me in ways that no one else had. One evening I found myself standing on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, the colors of the sky bleeding into each other. I hadn't noticed him approach, but when I turned, he was standing a few feet away, his presence as commanding as always. "You like to watch the sunset?" he asked, his voice low and smooth. I nodded, unable to form words. There was something about his voice that made everything inside me feel alive, like every word he spoke struck a chord deep within me. "I do too," he continued, taking a step closer. "It's peaceful here. A good place to forget." Forget. His words hit me like a wave, drowning me in the raw truth. I wasn't here just for peace. I was here to forget, to bury the memories of my marriage, the way he had looked at me just before everything fell apart, the way I had felt invisible for so long. But in this man's presence, I felt anything but invisible. I swallowed hard, unsure of what to say. "I'm not really here to talk." He didn't say anything for a moment. Instead, he took a step closer, his gaze never leaving mine. I could feel the heat from his body, even though we were still a few feet apart. The air between us was charged with an energy I couldn't explain. "You don't have to talk," he said softly, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that made my heart race. But sometimes just being around someone else, that's enough. I was frozen, caught in the web of his gaze. My breath caught in my throat as I realized just how close he was now. His scent, earthy and musky, filled my senses, and for a moment I forgot about everything else. His proximity was overwhelming, and I felt the familiar stirrings of desire that I hadn't felt in years. It was as if his mere presence ignited something inside me, something I had buried beneath the surface, something I was afraid to confront. I took a step back, needing space, needing air. But he followed me, his steps silent on the wooden porch. I can't. I stammered, my voice shaking. He stopped, his gaze softening just slightly, but the tension between us remained palpable. "You're not ready," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "But you will be." And with that he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, my heart pounding in my chest, my body humming with an energy I couldn't ignore. That night, as I lay in bed, I could still feel the heat of his presence, like a shadow that wouldn't leave me. I wanted to push him away, but deep down, I knew it wasn't him I was trying to escape. It was myself, my fear of letting someone in again. But the next day he was there again, and I couldn't shake the feeling that our paths were bound to cross in ways I couldn't predict. The tension between us was undeniable, and it was only a matter of time before it would break. I just didn't know if I was ready for it or if I ever would be. Days passed, but the quiet intensity of his presence didn't fade. In fact, it only grew stronger. I would wake each morning feeling his absence like a gap in the air, knowing he was somewhere close, watching, waiting. Every time I crossed paths with him, the atmosphere thickened, charged with unspoken words, with emotions neither of us dared voice. I began to notice the way he moved, slow, deliberate, how his gaze would linger just a moment too long, tracing the outline of my face, my hands, the curve of my body as I worked or wandered through the woods. It was as if he were cataloging every detail of me, committing it to memory in ways that left me breathless. And I, despite myself, began to do the same. The way his jaw clenched when he thought I wasn't looking, the way his eyes softened when he thought I wasn't paying attention, it was like we were dancing around a truth neither of us was ready to face. I told myself that I wasn't here for this, that I came to heal, to find peace. But with every stolen glance, every moment of silence between us, I felt something else stir, something deeper. And it scared me. One evening, as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, I found myself at the edge of the porch again, watching the world shift. The air was cool, the night promising to be still. But it wasn't. It never was when he was around. "I didn't expect you to be here," I said, my voice almost lost in the silence, the words slipping out before I could stop them. He appeared from the shadows, his presence unmistakable, as if he had been waiting there for me to speak. His eyes were darker than the night around us, and the way he looked at me felt like a touch. My heart skipped. "I wasn't sure I should be," he replied, his voice low and careful. He was just the caretaker after all. But he stayed, and with each passing day, I felt him drawing closer, as though some invisible tether was pulling us toward each other. It was undeniable, this pull between us. It made my heart beat erratically, like a drum that couldn't find its rhythm. We stood in silence for a few moments, the air thick with everything neither of us was willing to say. I turned my back to him, pretending to watch the last light of the day fade into night. But the truth was I couldn't stop feeling the weight of his gaze on my skin. "You don't have to pretend," he said softly, his voice coming from behind me. Close but not too close. I didn't turn around. Not yet. My heart was pounding too loud in my ears. I didn't know if I could take the weight of his words, of his presence, of whatever it was I was feeling. "I'm not pretending," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I just need some time to heal." His words were so simple, but they felt like a challenge. His tone wasn't mocking, but it wasn't comforting either. It was a question, a quiet probing, one that went straight to the heart of everything I had been running from. I swallowed hard. My throat felt tight, my chest constricted. I don't know if I can heal. I turned to face him, my eyes meeting his. How do you heal from something you don't know how to let go of? He stepped closer, his presence enveloping me like the night itself. You let go by holding on to something else. Sometimes it's not about forgetting. It's about finding something worth remembering. His words hung in the air between us, and for the first time I felt like he wasn't just the caretaker of the cabin, the stranger in my life. He was speaking from some deep place within himself. I could feel it, the unspoken pain, the vulnerability that seemed to reflect mine. I could tell he wasn't just speaking about me. He was speaking about himself too. We were both running from something, from pain, from guilt, from the ghosts of our past. But neither of us seemed ready to face it fully. We danced around it, tested each other, tested the boundaries of our emotions, our desires, our fears. I couldn't tell if he was aware of the way my pulse quickened when he was near, or if he felt the same tightening in his chest when our eyes met. There was something undeniable between us, and it was beginning to consume me. I wanted to run to escape, but I couldn't. His presence was like a magnetic force pulling me closer even as I tried to push away. His next words came in a low, almost hesitant whisper. What if you didn't have to do it alone? What if I could help you let go? I didn't respond immediately. His words, so simple, were full of layers. The temptation was there, like a promise I didn't know if I could keep. He was offering something I hadn't even allowed myself to want. I had spent so long convincing myself I didn't need anyone. But standing there in front of him, with the tension between us crackling, I realized how badly I wanted to give in. You don't have to, I started. But he stepped closer, his eyes never leaving mine. I know, he said softly, his voice carrying a weight of understanding, but sometimes we need someone to remind us that we're not as broken as we think we are. And that was the moment where everything shifted. I wasn't just a woman with a broken past anymore. I wasn't just the divorce hiding from the world. I was a woman who had been seen, understood, and desired by the man standing in front of me. His words weren't just about healing. They were about connection, about acceptance. As he stepped closer, closing the space between us, my breath hitched. I could feel his heat, the raw intensity in the way he looked at me. Every boundary I had set up, every wall I had built to protect myself felt like it was crumbling in that single moment. I was no longer afraid of what might happen. I didn't care. And when his lips finally met mine, it wasn't a kiss of desperation or haste. It was a kiss of understanding, of raw vulnerability, of the kind of connection that didn't need words. It was more than just physical. It was emotional. It was everything I had been running from and everything I needed. The moment was electric. It was everything I had been afraid of, but in the most beautiful way possible. The kiss lingered in the cool evening air, more like a shared breath than an action. His lips were soft yet firm, a stark contrast to the intensity that radiated between us. I had expected to pull back, to fight it, to run. But I didn't. I let myself be consumed by the fire that I had been trying so hard to ignore. And in that moment, the world outside the cabin ceased to exist. There was no past, no pain, no fear, just him, just us. His hand cupped the back of my neck, pulling me closer, the roughness of his fingers, a sharp contrast to the softness of his touch. I could feel the pulse in his wrist as it pressed against the skin of my throat, and I felt the sudden, undeniable truth. This was more than just a kiss. It was everything. I pulled back, but only just enough to look into his eyes. They were dark, intense, filled with an emotion I couldn't place, but felt in the very marrow of my bones. There was no hesitation in his gaze, no second-guessing. He knew what he wanted, and it was me. You don't have to do this, I whispered, even as my body screamed the opposite. This isn't what I came here for. But he was already shaking his head. his thumb gently brushing the side of my face as though to erase the doubt in my mind. "I know exactly what you came here for," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "You came here to escape, to forget. But you're not just running from your past. You're running from yourself, and you don't have to do that anymore." I closed my eyes, the weight of his words settling deep within me. I had come here to find peace, but peace had never been this complicated. Peace had never been this consuming. He wasn't just reminding me of my past. He was pushing me to confront it, to confront everything I had buried, everything I had been running from for so long. The tension between us was palpable. I could feel the heat radiating off his body, pulling me toward him as if some invisible force had taken over. Every nerve in my body screamed for more. But I was scared. Scared of what would happen if I let go. Scared of what it would mean to allow him to see all of me. But in that moment I realized something. I had spent so long hiding from the world, building walls around my heart, my body. I had convinced myself that I didn't need anyone, that I was fine alone. But he was here, and in his eyes I saw the invitation to be seen, to be understood in ways I had never allowed anyone to understand me. "Are you afraid of me?" he asked, his voice a whisper now, almost as if he were afraid of the answer. I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him that I wasn't afraid, that I had nothing to fear. But the truth was I was terrified. Terrified of the way he made me feel. Terrified of the way he saw me, of the way I felt as though I had no control over myself when he was near. "Yes," I admitted, my voice cracking with the vulnerability I had never allowed myself to show. "I'm afraid. Afraid of what this is. Afraid of what you're making me feel." His hand moved to my waist, pulling me even closer until I could feel his breath against my skin. "You don't have to be afraid," he said softly, his lips brushing against my ear as he spoke. "You're not alone in this. Not anymore." With that, his lips were on mine again, this time more urgent, more demanding. His hands were everywhere, on my back, my hips, the curve of my shoulders, as though he was memorizing every inch of me. I felt my body respond instantly, the tension that had been building within me for days finally exploding in a rush of desire. I reached for him, my hands shaking slightly as I pulled him closer, my fingers tingling in the soft fabric of his shirt. He groaned softly against my mouth, the sound sending a wave of heat through me. "You don't have to stop," he murmured between kisses, his hands sliding down to my hips, pulling me closer until our bodies were pressed against each other. "Let me show you what it means to feel alive again." I hesitated for a moment, a flicker of doubt still clinging to the edges of my mind. But it was only a moment. The desire coursing through me was too strong, too overwhelming to ignore any longer. I didn't want to fight it. I didn't want to hide from it. With a low, breathless laugh, I pulled away just long enough to look into his eyes. What if I regret this? His gaze never wavered, the intensity in his eyes never faltering. "You won't," he said, his voice steady, full of conviction. "Because this isn't just about tonight. This is about us, about what we've been hiding from. And we both know it." I couldn't argue with that. There was a truth in his words, in the way he looked at me, that resonated deep within me. We had been running, both of us, from things we didn't want to face. But right now, in this moment, it felt like everything was finally coming together. Like we were both exactly where we were supposed to be. I pulled him back to me, this time more urgently, as though we were both racing against some invisible clock. His hands moved to the buttons of my shirt, his touch tentative at first, as if asking for permission. I didn't stop him. Instead, I leaned into him, letting him take control, letting him peel away the layers I had so carefully hidden behind. The fabric of my shirt fell to the floor, and his hand slid over my skin, warm and gentle, sending shivers down my spine. His lips were on my neck now, trailing soft kisses along my jawline as I gasped, my hands gripping his shoulders, my body aching with the need to feel more, to feel everything. He responded to me like a man who had waited too long to touch, too long to be close. And I responded to him with the same hunger, the same urgency. When his lips found mine again, there was no hesitation, no doubt. There was only the undeniable truth of what was happening between us. What had been happening all along beneath the surface, building with every glance, every word, every touch. I was no longer afraid. I had let go of everything that had held me back. And in that moment, as he held me, kissed me, made me feel seen and wanted in a way I never had before, I knew that this was what I had been searching for all along. It wasn't just physical. It was emotional. It was healing. It was the answer to the silence I had been living in for so long. And for the first time in what felt like forever, I was truly completely alive. As the last traces of the night faded into dawn, we lay together, the quiet stillness of the cabin wrapping around us like a blanket. I could feel the steady beat of his heart against my chest. And in that moment I realized that nothing had to be perfect. It was never about having everything figured out. It was about being present, about allowing ourselves to let go of the past long enough to find something new, something real. He shifted slightly, his hand brushing my hair away from my face, his touch gentle, as though he were afraid to disturb the fragile peace we had found. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had spent so many years locked away in my own thoughts, convinced that I was better off alone. But in his arms, I discovered that I wasn't as broken as I had believed. And neither was he. "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered as though he had read my mind. His words were soft, but they carried weight. I could hear the sincerity in them, and for the first time I believed them. I smiled, my heart light. "Neither am I." The tension that had once filled every inch of the room was gone, replaced by something softer, something more lasting. We had crossed a boundary together, not just in the physical sense but in the emotional one as well. And as the morning sun slowly crept through the windows, I realized that I had found exactly what I needed. Not just a place to escape but a reason to stay.